does Francis Ngannou go with a win over Joshua? Well, let me stop you right there. Francis Ngannou has made a number of claims, and this goes back like 2 years, that have sounded silly, but he got them done. Right? Like his credibility is fully intact. And I don't know that every time Francis had a bird in the hand, I think some things he was just going for, it ended up working out. Either way, as I reflect back over the last couple of years of Francis's life, the things that he said he was going to do, he ended up doing somewhere along the way. I remember an interview, this is somewhat recently, this is after the announcement of Francis versus Joshua. Somewhere along the way, Francis said, win or lose against Joshua, I'm boxing Fury. Fury, win or lose against Usyk. One has nothing to do with the other. I am remashing Fury. I just have to do the Joshua fight first. Like the reporters asked him, they questioned him, they go, what happens if Francis, like they gave him every which possible scenario that is probably playing through in your head right now. And Francis very calmly answered that he will be fighting Fury. Whether that's for the unified and undisputed title, or it has nothing to do with titles, he would be boxing Fury. And his agreement that he has in place right now for accepting the Joshua fight encompasses that. Now, you can't make the other side fight. We can go and we can have that game. But also somewhere along the way, Francis has said that his next stop is going to be in the PFL in MMA. As a matter of fact, they've even got an opponent for him, right? And the guy calls himself the Problema. And the guy is a Problema. So where is Francis going to go and where's he going to end up? And in so many ways, it matters about the performance. And I don't know that we could sit back and even begin to speculate what that means where Francis comes out on top, absent of having his hand raised. Like, that's the spot that Francis is in right now. He is in high demand. The WBO has ranked him in the top 10. He's getting ready to take on Joshua, which allegedly is foreshadowing either a world title fight in the PFL or a world title fight in boxing. That is a very interesting thing, considering Francis didn't win, right? But it comes down to performance. He exceeded expectations, so what does he have to do with Joshua? How good does he have to look? Can he get stopped? Can he get stopped, but he gets stopped late? That's what happened with Conor. Conor got stopped, but he got stopped late. He made it to the 10th round. We were all completely enamored and impressed. Conor went out, sold out arenas. His opponent, Floyd, did not. I mean, there's ways to win with losing. But Francis is not a master of that. So what's he going to have to do? It's an interesting spot. And I don't know that it's one that we have the answer to. Joshua is banking on one notion, which is Francis overperformed. Francis overperformed and turned out to be better at boxing than we knew on the exact same evening that Tyson Fury overlooked an opponent who happened to be Francis. Tyson was down a notch. Francis was up a notch. That explains the 30 minutes. That explains the split decision. That explains the knockdown, at least according to Anthony Joshua. Well, that's a lot to be betting on. I mean, that is an awful lot to bank on. And yes, Joshua's going to have the pressure, but there's a trade-off, right? If you can get a jackpot full of money doing something that you've done your whole life against a guy who's never won at that thing, like, there is something you should have to deal with if you're going to get life-changing money. So if pressure, if embarrassment, if a knock down the ladder is one of them, it seems only right. And are we going to get Francis back to MMA? I was with Francis over the weekend. Now, so you understand, when I say I was with Francis, I'm in a building, Francis is in the same building. But all the things he was saying is that no matter what, win over Joshua, first round knockout, lost to Joshua. It doesn't make any difference. He's coming to the PFL. He's going to take on the winner of Problema versus Ryan Bader. They settled that piece of business, which means he's going to be taking on Problema. But things change fast. Dewey Cooper, Francis's coach, who has done just such a great job. But Dewey Cooper was on Ariel's show. He said, I would like for Francis to beat Joshua, then not do MMA, go back against Fury. And this is also taking into consideration that Fury beats Usyk, right? Like, there's a lot of parts that have to come together, but this is what Coach Dewey Cooper was speaking about. He said Francis will beat Fury in the rematch. He will be the undisputed boxing champion, which will make him the baddest man on earth, the only undisputed heavyweight boxing champion who is also the undisputed UFC champion. That would make him, and nobody could argue, the baddest man on earth. And it just makes you think, right? I mean, it's what keeps this business going around is conversation. Somebody making a perfectly logical statement. That's a very logical statement by Dewey Cooper. Like, that's very hard to argue against. But then you're going to get a wrestler like me that says, hey, I don't know how long the boxing champion's been the baddest dude on earth. I would look to the Olympic heavyweight wrestling champion. That's who I would look to. I don't know how many of those fights that Francis has had and has looked great in that I personally don't believe the guy announcing the fight could have stepped in and won. I don't know if there was a time that Francis was in the UFC that I personally believe that Daniel Cormier could have taken that suit off, got in there, and handled his business. I don't know. And one thing that I felt like we had very clearly established, starting all the way back in 1993, was the grappling was superior to the striking. So if we're going to conclude that somebody is so great because they became great at the striking, I am going to wonder, how did they do in Abu Dhabi? How did that person do when they took on Gordon Ryan? How did that person do when they took on Nick Gwiazdowski? How did that person do when they took on Gable Steepson? I'm going to wonder those things. I'm not ready to just concede. But that doesn't make me a jerk. That makes me good for business. If you don't have guys that can ask that question and constantly challenge it, you don't have an industry. I'm always going to question, always, how when you were under contract and had the opportunity to fight Jon Jones, you did not. Like, that isn't going to go away. And believe me, it's worked plenty of times where guys price themselves out. There used to be an organization called the Pride Fighting Championship. But there was dudes that I thought were tough guys. I didn't know, I hadn't seen them, I hadn't actually felt them, but they were in the magazines, they were selling DVDs in the back of Black Belt magazine, things like this. But they never fought. They never went over to Pride and fought. And Pride spoke to them. And what those guys would do is they would always price themselves out of the market. Well, I'll do it. I'll fight anybody. I'll take on Rickson Gracie. All you have to do is give me, and then it was some number that was 5 times the going rate. But they were able to maintain prestige. It was never a knock on them. It was a very clever way out. But I, as somebody that is standing on the outside and watching it, I mean, it's hard to go into a competition where you're a 12-1 underdog, where the world that watching is giving you absolutely no chance. Like, there's a real courage in doing that. But there is an equal amount of courage, just the other side of the coin, in going into an event where you're a 12-1 favorite, where you're risking everything, where nobody's giving you any credit because they think that guy can't do anything to you, that you're invincible compared to him. Nothing can go well. There will be no pats on the back. No matter if you win, no matter how quickly you win, you were supposed to do that. It requires courage. It's a different kind of courage. And if there's a fight that you sidestepped against somebody that is in question, oh, by the way, you weigh 50 pounds more than that guy, that's a very meaningful question for somebody like me to ask. I don't know what it would be like from a personal standpoint. I've never sidestepped anybody, ever. Particularly somebody that I was 50 pounds bigger than, ever. I couldn't even imagine. I could not follow the golden rule of life of putting myself in somebody else's shoes. How would I respond? I would have swung. That's how I would have responded. It's an interesting position. It's a position unlike anybody else has been in. And it appears by many that Francis's next move is to go into MMA. I don't have information otherwise. But I will tell you, Francis hasn't been wrong In 2 years, he's made, they've all come around. And somewhere along the way, I do remember him saying, as part of his deal to fight Joshua, is a rematch, regardless of outcome, with Fury. If you have heard something different, or if you believe that I heard that wrong, misinterpreted in the first place, please leave me a comment below.